And the first of its kind study examines how marijuana use affects female fertility. This timing is significant. Women aged 19 to 30 are now using cannabis at higher rates than men for the first time on record. Reproductive specialist Dr. Deborah Ikena-Abel at Aspire Fertility Austin joins us now to break down this study. Dr. Deborah, thanks so much for joining us once again. Absolutely. Now let's break this down. What are the key findings of this study?
Yeah, so this study was a study looking at the effects of marijuana use on the oocyte or the egg. And they did find that important genes for the formation of the egg, for ovulation, for the separation of the parts of the egg that then can be fertilized to result in an embryo were affected. And they noticed that more of the embryos created from people who were exposed to marijuana were abnormal. And when you have an abnormal embryo, that embryo is not able to result in a live birth. It will either result in no pregnancy or in a miscarriage.
Okay, so how does marijuana affect the female reproductive system specifically?
So specifically what this study shows is that when women are exposed to marijuana while trying to conceive, they're more likely to make abnormal eggs because that process that is involved in the formation of eggs is affected. And then these abnormal eggs are more likely to create abnormal embryos, which then leads to a lower chance of getting pregnant and a higher chance for miscarriage.
So why might cannabis use make it harder for women to conceive? Can I conclude that?
Exactly. So you can definitely conclude that while you're trying to conceive, you want to avoid exposure to cannabis, ideally for about 3 months prior to when you start trying to conceive. That's because the processes that were affected by the study typically start to happen in that range of time prior to conception.
So what should women know about recreational and what about medicinal use of marijuana?
Yeah, I think it's important to think about marijuana in the recreational sense, the way that you would think about alcohol or nicotine. Just because it's from a quote-unquote natural source, just like nicotine is from a natural source, tobacco is it's a plant, as well as alcohol, doesn't mean that it is completely safe in all instances. And so the same way that you would exercise caution while trying to conceive with with nicotine or alcohol, I would say to do a similar thing with marijuana.
But what if it's medicinal and they need to take it?
Yeah, I would say if it's medicinal and they need to take it, to definitely prior to pregnancy, weigh the pros versus the cons, the risks versus the benefits. In pregnancy, however, marijuana has been linked to poorer fetal outcomes, including the risk of neurodevelopmental issues, similar like you would see with alcohol use in pregnancy. Not the same picture, but just kind of thinking how it can affect the development of the brain and the nervous system. And so in pregnancy, I would encourage women who are on medicinal marijuana to look for alternatives that are safe in pregnancy for pain control.
What else about this study stuck out to you?
You know, I was really happy that someone had come up with a study that really looked specifically at egg function or oocyte function in pregnancy. I think prior to now, we had a lot of pretty good data showing that marijuana negatively impacted male fertility. Decreased sperm counts, decreased motility, poorer outcomes. But we didn't really have a good study looking at eggs because eggs are much harder to study. In order to get eggs, you have to do a procedure known as an egg retrieval. You usually need to stimulate the ovaries to produce those eggs. So I really appreciated the work that went into designing the study and executing the study. And, you know, women's health research is one of those areas that needs more research. And I think this is great that we have this data so we can better counsel our patients about their behaviors and lifestyle choices in pregnancy and while trying to conceive.
Dr. Deborah, we always appreciate you coming on the show and enlightening us and talking through these complicated studies, right? So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.